Thank you for joining today's analysis. Part 1. A strategic shockwave. When rhetoric signals a shift from observation to intervention. According to analysts, the most dangerous moments in geopolitics are not always marked by explosions, but by words that signal a shift in intent. When Russia publicly raises its tone and begins framing the conflict around Iran as a matter of strategic necessity, it is not simply engaging in diplomacy. It is repositioning itself on the global chessboard. The opening signals in this crisis are not random. The firm statements attributed to Russia's foreign policy leadership indicate a deliberate escalation in political and strategic posture. According to analysts, this is not about immediate military deployment, but about redefining influence. Moscow is no longer content to remain a distant observer while the Middle East becomes a battlefield shaped primarily by the United States and its allies. This raises a critical question. Is the current escalation in the Middle East still a regional conflict, or is it becoming a proxy arena for great power competition? According to analysts, Russia's messaging serves multiple layers of purpose. At the surface level, it aims to deter further military action against Iran by signaling that continued escalation will not remain a bilateral matter. At a deeper level, it is an attempt to reshape the framework of the conflict itself, moving it away from unilateral military dominance and toward a contested geopolitical environment. This is where the strategic significance becomes clear. When Moscow emphasizes diplomatic channels such as the United Nations Security Council, it is not merely advocating peace. It is attempting to pull the conflict into institutional arenas where power is negotiated rather than imposed. In these arenas, the United States does not enjoy the same level of operational dominance as it does on the battlefield. But why does this matter now? Because according to analysts, the timing of these statements coincides with a broader transformation in the nature of the conflict involving Iran. Tehran has made it clear that it does not intend to retreat under pressure. Its leadership has publicly rejected calls for de-escalation under conditions it views as unfavorable, and has instead signaled readiness to absorb and respond to further military actions. This introduces a new strategic variable, endurance. Unlike shorter conflicts where decisive strikes can quickly alter the balance, Iran represents a system with depth, geographical, military, and political. According to analysts, this depth allows Iran to transform any rapid escalation into a prolonged engagement, increasing the cost for any external actor attempting to impose a quick outcome. This leads to one of the central dilemmas now facing the United States. If Washington chooses to expand its military campaign, it risks entering a prolonged phase of strategic attrition. Iran's size, terrain, and decentralized military structure make it resistant to quick neutralization. Even without a large-scale ground invasion, sustained air operations alone could evolve into a long-term commitment with unclear end goals. On the other hand, if the United States limits its actions or shifts toward de-escalation, it risks signaling weakness, both to its adversaries and to its allies in the region. According to analysts, this is not a binary decision, but a strategic trap. Every available option carries significant cost. This is where the economic dimension begins to intersect with military strategy. The imbalance between offensive and defensive costs is becoming increasingly evident. Low-cost drones and missile systems deployed by Iran or its aligned forces can force the use of highly expensive interception systems by the United States and Israel. Over time, this creates a form of asymmetric financial pressure. Even if defensive systems perform effectively, the cost-exchange ratio favors the attacker. According to analysts, this dynamic does not produce immediate battlefield collapse, but it erodes sustainability. And sustainability, in modern conflict, is often more decisive than initial firepower. Another layer of complexity emerges when considering the broader strategic environment. Russia and China, while not directly engaging militarily, have strong incentives to support Iran through indirect means, diplomatic backing, economic cooperation, and potentially technological assistance. According to analysts, this model of indirect support is highly efficient. It allows these powers to influence the outcome of the conflict without incurring the risks associated with direct confrontation. At the same time, it forces the United States to distribute its strategic attention across multiple regions. This introduces a second critical question. Can the United States maintain strategic focus across multiple theaters simultaneously? Because while the Middle East escalates, other fronts remain active. According to analysts, any deepening involvement in Iran-related conflict could reduce Washington's flexibility in other key areas, creating opportunities for its strategic competitors. At this point, the conflict begins to take on characteristics that extend far beyond its initial trigger. What started as a confrontation involving Iran is gradually transforming into a multi-layered strategic contest involving global power structures. And yet, one of the most important factors remains internal to Iran itself. According to analysts, Iran is not only facing external pressure, but also dealing with long-standing internal challenges, economic strain, social tensions, and generational divides. These factors do not operate in isolation. Instead, they interact with external pressure in complex ways. External force can intensify internal fractures, but it can also produce consolidation under perceived threat. This dual effect makes the outcome highly unpredictable. So the real question is not simply whether Iran can withstand external pressure, but how internal dynamics will evolve under sustained confrontation. At the same time, the strategic importance of Iran within the Middle East cannot be overstated. According to analysts, Iran is not just another actor in the region. It is a central node in the broader geopolitical structure. Its geographic position, energy resources, and network of regional relationships give it a level of influence that cannot be easily bypassed. This leads to a deeper strategic implication. Any attempt to reshape the Middle East without addressing the Iran factor is unlikely to produce a stable outcome. And any attempt to directly confront Iran carries the risk of triggering a wider regional escalation. Which brings us back to the opening premise. Is this truly about Iran alone? Or is Iran the focal point of a much larger transformation in global power dynamics? According to analysts, the current situation is best understood not as a single conflict, but as a convergence point. Military pressure, economic competition, political signaling, and strategic positioning are all intersecting in one region. And when multiple layers of competition converge, the margin for error becomes extremely small. The next phase of this conflict will not be defined solely by missiles or airstrikes. It will be defined by decisions. Strategic decisions, made under pressure, with incomplete information, and with consequences that extend far beyond the immediate battlefield. And the most important question remains unanswered. Who is actually shaping the outcome? And who is being pulled into a game they no longer fully control? Part 2. The strategic foundations. How doctrine, geography, and technology shape the battlefield according to analysts. To understand the trajectory of this conflict, it is necessary to move beyond surface-level events and examine the structural foundations that define how each actor operates. What is unfolding is not random escalation, but the result of deeply rooted strategic doctrines, long-term military development, and competing visions of regional order. At the center of this structure lies Iran's strategic philosophy. Unlike conventional military powers that prioritize rapid dominance, Iran has developed a doctrine centered on endurance, dispersion, and layered response. This approach is not new. It was shaped by historical experience, particularly the Iran-Iraq War, where Tehran learned that survival in a prolonged conflict depends less on immediate superiority and more on resilience and adaptability. According to analysts, this doctrine has evolved into what is now described as hybrid warfare. It combines conventional capabilities, such as ballistic missiles, with asymmetric tools like drones, proxy networks, and electronic warfare. The goal is not necessarily to win quickly, but to impose continuous pressure across multiple dimensions. This is where Iran's geographic and structural advantages become critical. The country's terrain, mountainous, vast, and difficult to penetrate, provides natural defense in depth. Its military infrastructure is not concentrated in a single location, but dispersed across multiple layers, reducing vulnerability to precision strikes. According to analysts, this decentralized architecture is specifically designed to absorb and survive initial attacks, allowing Iran to sustain operations over time. At the same time, Iran has invested heavily in domestic military production. Sanctions, rather than limiting its capabilities, have forced Tehran to develop internal systems in missile technology, drone manufacturing, and command control networks. This has created a form of strategic autonomy. According to analysts, this autonomy allows Iran to maintain operational continuity even under sustained external pressure. In contrast, the United States operates under a fundamentally different strategic framework. Its doctrine emphasizes technological superiority, rapid strike capability, and network-centric warfare. Precision-guided munitions, advanced surveillance systems, and integrated command structures enable the U.S. to project power globally with high efficiency. However, according to analysts, this model also has limitations in environments like Iran. High-tech systems are effective in delivering targeted damage, but they are less suited to achieving decisive outcomes against dispersed and adaptive adversaries. When facing a system designed for endurance, speed alone may not translate into strategic success. This difference in doctrine creates a structural asymmetry, not in strength, but in operational logic. The United States seeks to compress conflict timelines, while Iran seeks to extend them. And in prolonged engagements, the balance of advantage can shift. Israel, meanwhile, operates within a hybrid model of its own. Its defense doctrine is built around rapid response, intelligence dominance, and layered air defense systems. Technologies such as multi-tier interception systems are designed to neutralize incoming threats before they reach critical infrastructure. Yet, according to analysts, even the most advanced defense systems face saturation limits. When confronted with large volumes of incoming projectiles, particularly low-cost drones combined with ballistic missiles, the defensive cost increases exponentially. This creates what analysts describe as a cost inversion effect, where defending becomes more expensive than attacking. Over time, this dynamic introduces economic pressure as a strategic variable. Another critical dimension is the role of external actors, particularly Russia and China. While neither is directly engaged militarily, their strategic calculations significantly influence the balance. Russia's approach, according to analysts, is rooted in multi-layered leverage. By supporting Iran politically and diplomatically, Moscow can constrain Western freedom of action without committing forces on the ground. This aligns with a broader doctrine of indirect engagement, shaping outcomes through pressure rather than direct confrontation. At the same time, Russia benefits from any situation that forces the United States to divide its strategic focus. According to analysts, this redistribution of attention can create opportunities in other theaters, particularly in Eastern Europe. China's role is more economic but equally strategic. Its reliance on Middle Eastern energy flows means stability is critical, yet it also benefits from a weakened U.S. position in the region. According to analysts, China's strategy focuses on maintaining access while avoiding direct entanglement, using economic ties as a stabilizing influence. Together, these dynamics create a complex network of interests that extends far beyond the immediate battlefield. Another foundational element is the evolution of military technology. Modern warfare is no longer defined solely by large-scale troop movements. Instead, it is shaped by precision, connectivity, and cost efficiency. Drones, for example, have transformed the operational landscape. Low-cost, high-volume systems can perform reconnaissance, deliver strikes, and overwhelm defenses. According to analysts, this shift reduces the entry barrier for effective military action, allowing actors with limited resources to challenge more advanced forces. Ballistic missile technology, meanwhile, provides strategic reach. Iran's development of medium-range systems enables it to project power across the region, targeting both military and infrastructure assets. These capabilities are not only tactical tools, but also instruments of deterrence. Electronic warfare adds another layer. Disrupting communication, navigation, and targeting systems can degrade the effectiveness of high-tech forces. According to analysts, this invisible dimension of warfare is becoming increasingly decisive. All of these elements combine to form the strategic foundation of the current conflict. It is not a simple confrontation between two sides. It is a layered system of doctrines, technologies, and objectives interacting simultaneously. At its core, the conflict is driven by competing strategic goals. Iran seeks to preserve its sovereignty, expand its regional influence, and impose costs on any external intervention. The United States aims to maintain regional stability under its strategic framework, protect allies, and prevent the emergence of hostile power centers. Israel focuses on immediate security, deterrence, and neutralization of threats within its operational range. Russia and China, while not direct participants, aim to reshape the broader balance of power in ways that reduce Western dominance. According to analysts, these objectives are not easily reconciled. And when strategic goals are incompatible, conflict becomes not just likely, but structurally embedded. This leads to a critical realization. What we are witnessing is not merely escalation. It is the manifestation of long-standing strategic trajectories converging at a single point. Each actor is operating according to its own logic, its own doctrine, and its own perception of risk. And as these logics interact, the system becomes increasingly complex and increasingly unstable. The question now is no longer about what has happened. It is about how these underlying structures will shape what happens next. Because in a conflict defined by endurance, technology, and strategic depth, outcomes are not determined by a single event. They are determined by the ability to sustain pressure, adapt to change, and outlast the opponent. And in that kind of conflict, time itself becomes the most important variable. Part 3. The battlefield logic. How strategy, pressure, and power balance are unfolding in real time according to analysts. The current phase of the conflict is no longer defined by isolated strikes, but by a continuous cycle of action and response that reveals a deeper strategic mechanism at work. What appears on the surface as escalation is, in reality, a structured interaction between competing objectives, each side attempting to impose its own logic on the battlefield. At the operational level, the conflict is unfolding across multiple layers simultaneously. Missile strikes, drone operations, air defenses, and information campaigns are not separate elements. They are integrated components of a broader strategic design. Iran's approach, according to analysts, is built around controlled escalation. Rather than seeking immediate decisive victory, Tehran appears to be calibrating its actions to maintain pressure without triggering a full-scale conventional invasion. This is a critical distinction. By operating within a threshold that is aggressive but not maximal, Iran keeps the conflict active while avoiding conditions that would justify overwhelming retaliation. This creates a dynamic where the conflict remains intense, but contained within a flexible boundary. On the ground and in the air, this translates into repeated waves of missile and drone activity. Each wave serves multiple purposes, testing defensive systems, imposing economic costs, and signaling capability. According to analysts, these actions are not random. They are part of a feedback loop designed to observe, adapt, and refine. Israel's response reflects a different operational priority. Its primary objective is immediate threat neutralization. Air defense systems are activated continuously, intercepting incoming projectiles and protecting critical infrastructure. At the same time, targeted strikes aim to degrade launch capabilities and disrupt command networks. However, according to analysts, this defensive posture carries inherent limitations. No system can guarantee complete interception, especially under saturation conditions. Each successful strike that penetrates defenses, even if limited, has a disproportionate psychological and strategic impact. This introduces a key factor, perception. In modern conflict, perception of vulnerability can be as significant as actual damage. According to analysts, the visibility of impacts within urban areas alters the psychological balance, influencing both public sentiment and political decision-making. The United States, meanwhile, operates as both a participant and a stabilizing force. Its actions are calibrated to support allies and deter escalation, but also to avoid direct entanglement in a prolonged ground conflict. This creates a constrained operational space. According to analysts, Washington is attempting to manage escalation rather than dominate it. This is a subtle but important shift. Instead of pursuing total battlefield control, the objective becomes maintaining equilibrium, preventing the conflict from crossing thresholds that would trigger wider regional involvement. Yet, this equilibrium is inherently unstable. Each side is testing limits, and each test carries the risk of miscalculation. A strike that is intended as a signal can be interpreted as escalation. A defensive response can be perceived as preparation for a larger offensive. According to analysts, this ambiguity is one of the most dangerous aspects of the current situation. Another critical mechanism shaping the battlefield is the expansion of operational space. The conflict is no longer confined to direct exchanges between Iran and Israel. It extends across the region, involving multiple actors and locations. Rocket fire from allied groups, incidents in neighboring territories, and tensions in strategic waterways all contribute to a distributed battlefield. According to analysts, this dispersion increases complexity and reduces predictability. It also introduces asymmetry in engagement. While state actors operate within certain constraints, non-state or proxy forces can act with greater flexibility. This allows pressure to be applied in multiple directions simultaneously, complicating defensive planning. From a strategic perspective, this multi-directional pressure serves a clear purpose. It stretches defensive resources. According to analysts, when a system is forced to defend across multiple fronts, its effectiveness in any single area may decrease. This is not necessarily due to weakness, but due to distribution of attention and capability. This brings us to the evolving balance of power. At first glance, the United States and Israel maintain clear advantages in technology, intelligence, and precision strike capability. However, according to analysts, power in this context is not measured solely by capability, but by sustainability. If one side can maintain pressure at a lower cost over a longer period, it can gradually shift the balance, even without achieving decisive victories. This is where Iran's strategy aligns with its doctrine. By sustaining a steady tempo of operations, it forces its opponents to remain in a constant state of readiness. Over time, this can lead to resource depletion, operational fatigue, and political pressure. At the same time, Iran avoids committing to actions that would justify overwhelming retaliation. This balance between pressure and restraint is the core of its current approach. Another dimension of the battlefield is information. According to analysts, narrative control is now an integral part of strategy. Each side frames its actions as defensive and the opponent's as aggressive. This is not merely for domestic audiences, but for international perception. Legitimacy influences support, and support influences strategic options. This is particularly relevant in a conflict that is being closely monitored by global powers. Diplomatic positioning, public statements, and media narratives all contribute to shaping the environment in which decisions are made. At this stage, the conflict can be understood as a system of interacting pressures. Military pressure, economic pressure, psychological pressure, and political pressure are all operating simultaneously. No single element is decisive on its own, but together, they create a cumulative effect. According to analysts, the key question is whether this system will stabilize or continue to escalate. Stabilization would require a shift toward negotiation or de-escalation mechanisms, something that currently appears limited by conflicting objectives. Continued escalation, on the other hand, increases the probability of threshold crossing. And once a critical threshold is crossed, whether through a large-scale strike, a significant loss of life, or a direct confrontation between major powers, the nature of the conflict could change rapidly. This brings us to the current strategic balance. It is not a stable balance of peace. It is a dynamic balance of tension. Each side is advancing its objectives incrementally, while attempting to avoid triggering a scenario it cannot control. According to analysts, this is one of the most complex forms of conflict, because it operates in a space between war and restraint. And in that space, outcomes are not determined by strength alone. They are determined by timing, perception, and the ability to manage risk under uncertainty. As the conflict continues to evolve, the mechanisms we are observing now will shape its trajectory, not through a single decisive event, but through the accumulation of decisions, actions, and reactions over time. And in that process, the balance of power will not remain static. It will shift, gradually, but significantly, with each move that is made. A shifting global order. Consequences, risks, and the future trajectory of a widening conflict according to analysts. What is unfolding is no longer a contained regional crisis, but a structural turning point with implications that extend far beyond the Middle East. The cumulative effects of sustained military pressure, strategic signaling, and geopolitical positioning are beginning to reshape not only the battlefield, but the broader architecture of global power. At the immediate level, the consequences are already visible. The expansion of the conflict across multiple fronts has increased volatility across the region. Strategic infrastructure, urban centers, and military installations are all operating under heightened threat conditions. According to analysts, this creates a persistent environment of instability, where even limited incidents can trigger disproportionate reactions. But the more significant impact lies beneath the surface. One of the clearest consequences is the transformation of deterrence. Traditional deterrence models relied on clear thresholds and predictable responses. In the current environment, those thresholds are becoming blurred. Actions that would previously have triggered full-scale escalation are now being absorbed into a continuous cycle of limited conflict. According to analysts, this erosion of clear red lines increases the risk of miscalculation. When each side operates under different assumptions about acceptable limits, the probability of unintended escalation rises. A strike intended as a signal can be interpreted as a shift toward total war. A defensive maneuver can be seen as preparation for a broader offensive. This ambiguity is not a temporary condition. It is becoming a defining feature of modern conflict. Another major consequence is the economic dimension. The Middle East remains central to global energy flows, and any disruption has immediate ripple effects. According to analysts, even the perception of instability can drive fluctuations in oil markets, affecting prices, supply chains, and economic planning worldwide. This introduces a feedback loop between conflict and the global economy. As tensions rise, economic pressure increases. And as economic pressure increases, political constraints on decision-making intensify. Governments must balance strategic objectives with domestic stability, creating additional layers of complexity. In this context, the conflict becomes not only a military challenge, but a global economic variable. At the same time, the role of major powers is evolving. The United States, while still maintaining significant influence, is operating within a more contested environment. Its ability to project power remains strong, but its freedom of action is increasingly constrained by the presence of other strategic actors. According to analysts, Russia and China are not merely observers. They are participants in shaping the environment, even without direct military engagement. Russia leverages diplomatic channels, strategic messaging, and indirect support to influence outcomes. China, through economic ties and energy interests, plays a stabilizing yet opportunistic role. Together, they contribute to a shift toward a more multipolar system. This shift is gradual, but it is becoming more visible. The concept of a single dominant power shaping regional outcomes is being replaced by a network of competing influences. According to analysts, this does not necessarily lead to immediate confrontation, but it does increase the complexity of conflict resolution. Because in a multipolar environment, consensus becomes harder to achieve. Another critical consequence is the normalization of hybrid warfare. The integration of conventional strikes, drone operations, cyber activity, and economic pressure is no longer an exception. It is becoming the standard model of conflict. According to analysts, this model favors adaptability over scale. Large, centralized forces are increasingly vulnerable to distributed, flexible systems. The ability to operate across multiple domains simultaneously becomes more important than dominance in any single domain. This has long-term implications for military planning worldwide. Nations are likely to invest more in cost-efficient systems, decentralized command structures, and multi-layered defense mechanisms. The lessons drawn from this conflict will influence future doctrines far beyond the Middle East. At the same time, the human and societal dimension cannot be overlooked. Prolonged instability affects civilian populations, infrastructure, and governance. According to analysts, the longer the conflict continues, the greater the risk of internal pressures within all involved states. For Iran, internal dynamics will remain a key factor. Economic challenges, social tensions, and political expectations will shape its ability to sustain prolonged confrontation. For the United States and its allies, domestic considerations, public opinion, economic costs, and political cycles will influence strategic decisions. This interplay between external conflict and internal stability adds another layer of unpredictability. Looking forward, several potential trajectories emerge. One possibility is controlled de-escalation. This would involve a gradual reduction in direct confrontation, potentially through diplomatic channels. According to analysts, this scenario would require concessions from multiple sides and a willingness to prioritize stability over immediate strategic gains. Another possibility is prolonged attrition. In this scenario, the conflict continues at a sustained but limited intensity. No side achieves decisive victory, but all incur ongoing costs. According to analysts, this is currently the most probable trajectory, given the existing balance of incentives. A third scenario involves rapid escalation. A significant event, such as a large-scale strike or a major loss of life, could push the conflict beyond its current boundaries. This would increase the likelihood of direct involvement by additional actors and transform the conflict into a broader regional war. Each of these scenarios carries significant implications, but none of them offers a simple resolution. According to analysts, the most important takeaway is that the conflict has entered a phase where outcomes are no longer determined by individual actions, but by systemic interactions. Military decisions, economic pressures, political calculations, and technological developments are all interconnected. And as these elements continue to interact, the system evolves. This brings us to the final strategic insight. What we are witnessing is not just a conflict, it is a transition. A transition in how wars are fought, a transition in how power is distributed, and a transition in how global stability is maintained or challenged. The Middle East is not the endpoint of this transformation. It is the starting point, and the decisions made here will resonate far beyond the region, shaping the trajectory of global geopolitics in the years to come. The question is no longer whether the system will change. It already is. The question now is, who will adapt to that change, and who will be left behind by it? Please tune in for a more detailed analysis in the next video.